You stay till the end of this video. There is a little sweet surprise for you. And now, without further ado, hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My guest today is Sam Scomparin.
That's perfect.
Yeah, you say it.
Well, it's just Sam. It's much easier. Yeah,
okay.
It's going to be Scomparin, but yeah, Sam is just fine.
So you actually came from Italy originally, right?
Yes, I actually came from Italy. I moved to Ireland about 10 years ago now.
Right. So tell me about growing up in Italy. Like, were you surrounded by crafters? Were your family very crafty?
Well, I grew up in the middle of a very rural community. My family is from the Dolomites, which is the northeast side of Italy, very close to the Austrian border. And my family owns a farm. So I grew up in the middle of a big farm, and everybody, literally my family, was very crafting, is very crafty still. And on the knitting side, I literally grew up with my great-grandmother knitting. Like, I've always remember her knitting something on the go, being socks, being a scarf, a shawl or something. My grandmother as well, my mom, everybody literally does some sort of fiber craft. And on the male side of the family as well, my grandfather, my dad, they make do basically. When you live in a farm in the middle of the mountains, you actually need to get something and make something. You can't really purchase anything right away. So they all were or are still very crafty. And I think I got my crafty side probably from my family a little bit. So yeah.
They weren't the ones who taught you how to knit, right? How did you learn how to knit?
Well, I thought about this question a lot. So formally, in brackets, I learned to knit in school. In secondary school in Italy, there is a subject called Applied Arts and Crafts, in which they actually teach you all the crafty traditions of the region. So if you think Italy is a big boot and is divided in 20 regions, and every region was formerly a state by itself, an independent state that was put together in the Italian Republic that we have now. So every state has, or every region, specific traditions, and they tend to teach them in primary and secondary school. And in secondary school, I was so lucky to have this professor, so this teacher that looked like someone coming out of Hogwarts. She was dressing up always in wool and very traditional costumes. And she gave knitting classes, despite, like, you know, the boys being teenagers, they kind of weren't really into fibercraft, but at the end of the year, the entire class was able to knit. Formally, I said, because I think I always had some sort of knit tool in my hand, being a crochet, being a pair of needles. As I mentioned, my great-grandmother was knitting literally all the time, and my mom as well. So I remember since a very young age to being playing with the needles and the yarn around the house, just like, I don't know, making pompons or little tablecloth with my crochet or stuff like that. So I think it's something that grew with my upbringing as well. And probably then I rediscovered all of this once I moved to Ireland, and I found myself for the first time kind of really alone, to have to build my own life back again, and having to make friends, having to find new hobbies. And I kind of fish into the bucket of hobbies and stuff that I knew to do. So I got in the local craft shop and I bought myself a pair of stray needle. That was what I remember my grandmother knitting with. And I started knitting again. And then through YouTube and then books, I kind of learned all these new cool techniques, knitting in the round, knitting color work, and all these type of things. So that is something that really was much part of my life, to be honest.
And when your family looks at you now and sees like this gorgeous sweater that you're wearing right now, let's say, what's their reaction? Like, did they see that coming? Did they ever think that you might turn to be a knitter?
This is a very tough question. And it's tough because, unfortunately, I don't know if it's Italy nowadays, if it's my family specific, that could be. I have a very traditional Italian family, and knitting is still, despite all the efforts from teachers and the culture changing, is still seen as something really that belongs to the women's world. So for me, it's a little bit of a coming out process. So I'm slowly introducing my family, my friends here in Italy, to my hand knitted stuff. Like I'm wearing this jumper around the house and my mom is like, oh, that's a very cool jumper. Who did make it for you? So, you know, very, very gently and slowly introducing my family to my craft is something that I'm really pursuing now. So I feel like every time I come up with something as brilliant as a jumper or as simple as a pair of mittens, really surprise my family and kind of probably bring some sort of pride as well, although they would never say that.
Well, how about like your Irish friends? Like, is that any different in Ireland? Do you feel like
100%, yeah.
really?
I feel like Ireland is such a, it's kind of a village, and to all my Irish friends, I really apologize if I don't address you well, but it's like a very small island, and everybody literally know everybody. At the same time, though, it's not the insular feeling that you would have here in the Dolomites. I'm saying here because I'm actually visiting my family now, so it's a very open and very forward community. We had a few years ago the marriage referendum for allowing same-sex couple to have a proper marriage. And that was the first country in the world to approve the same couple marriage by a referendum. And this tells you a lot about the community in which I'm living and how Ireland is such a great and fostering country for I don't know, the knitting community, the crafty community, and not genderizing a craft, which is for me really, really important right now. And I really prize Ireland of being such a welcoming and open country as well.
Well, I must tell you, like today in the morning, I woke up, I was looking through, like I was prepping for the interview. I was looking through like all your stuff, right? Like through your YouTube channels, through your Instagram. And then I had to like call my husband and tell him, look at this guy. He paints. He is a pianist. He is an attorney. He can knit like God. He designs knitting. Like, how do they make them that talented, right? Like, how many talents can be put in one body? And like, how do you balance it all? Like, how, like, because you're very passionate about everything you do.
I don't balance, that's the point. I think, well, let me start. Let me see if I can find it here. So when I was very young, I was introduced to this book. This is one of the greatest Italian books. It's written by Gabriele D'Annunzio, which is as well a Nobel Prize, I think. And this book is basically a statement that he makes about the modern Italian man of the 20th century. And it basically is saying in some sentence there, a life is not worth to be lived if is not lived as an artwork. So the father tell the son in the book, you should live your life as it was an artwork. And I was very, very young when I got to read this book, and I always grow with this sentence resonating with me and bouncing back in my mind all the time. You should live your life as it was an artwork. Until I was about 24, 25, I had in my mind, the idea that I would become a professional pianist. I studied music all the way through all the schools that allows you to become a professional pianist. I played with the National Orchestra for a while. And then my family was saying, well, you don't really make money out of being a pianist. And so I was like, what should I do? And I picked the first university, basically, that was giving me some sort of possible income in the future and a stable job. And I graduated in law, and I became a solicitor or an attorney, as you guys say in America. And that is currently my daily job. But I always found myself having to balance my daily work and my inner instinct and urgency to create and make something that is really meaningful to me, being painting, being playing some music or composing some music, being knitting. And I feel like if I wouldn't have this outlet of creating and making stuff, I probably would be, I don't know, mad or dead by now. So it's really, really important to me. And I say I don't balance this because really art and craft takes you by passion. So whenever you start a new project, I start a new jumper or I start a new painting, I get overbeared by the emotion of making that item or making that painting or I don't know, whatever else I might do. And for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks even, that becomes my 100%. So even if I do something else and I try to be extremely professional in my daily job, I still keep thinking and mounting within my head, oh, I wish I was able to do that 24/7 or to spend more time in my craft, in my art thing. So it's always a struggle. But I think at the very end of the day, this brings back to the idea of having to live my life as it was an artwork. And I really wish when I'm very old to be able to say, well, I actually did something that was meaningful, not just for me, but for other people.
Right.
And when I decided to study law, if I can just give you a nice little thing, my piano teacher was very upset. And he was telling me, remember that when you retire, you want to be a lawyer because you are retired. So what do you do? But if you retire as a pianist, you always be a pianist and you can play until you're 99. So
Right.
that always was something that makes me think. And yeah.
Do you find it frustrating? Because, and I'll tell you why, right? So my son is also has been trained as a professional, like as a classical pianist all his life. He played piano while he was studying to be an engineer at MIT, which like he was so busy with studies that he would play like 2 o'clock in the morning. And he was saying how this is his meditative space and he needs to like have peace and quiet and like nobody else is there. And that's when he plays at his best, right? So he played when he became an engineer, like until very recently. And even now he just like starts playing with more jazz than classical, but it's always like part of his life. However, lately he got into climbing, into bouldering, and suddenly there is less time for piano, right? Do you have problem like for yourself, like dealing with limited amount of time and so many passions?
Yes, yes, indeed. Like an example is like now I'm all into knitting. I'm getting some very good feedback through my YouTube channel, for example, and through my knitting Instagram account. And I feel like I'm not spending as much time painting. And I feel like I'm kind of struggling with that because when I'm painting, I'm thinking, oh, well, I should be knitting or creating content for my knitting community. And on the other hand, when I'm knitting, I'm like, well, this is a lot of time that I could be spending painting or playing the piano. So it's always this big mess, but I'm a very messy person myself. But like your son, we probably share a similar path. I was studying music when I was studying law as well. So playing was, again, my meditating space. I remember studying a piece and repeating just a couple of bars over and over. It was very difficult and very technical. And I had workers working in the house, and they kept seeing this and this and this, repeating the same couple of bars. And they asked my mom if I had any mental issues or something, because they were like, wow. But for me, it was just spending 10, 12 hours studying music. That was my space and something that I really loved doing, rather than, I don't know, a criminal law exam. That was something that I had to do.
Right. So like also you have two different YouTube channels. You have one for paintings and then you have one for knitwear, right?
Yeah.
How do you decide which one you're gonna work on and which one you're gonna post? And does that stress you out?
Yes, it does stress me out immensely. I feel like I'm in a constant battle against the YouTube algorithm, Instagram algorithm, and all the algorithms that I can imagine, I can think of. Well, how I approach this is for my knitting podcast, I kind of have a schedule, which is like a sort of a bi-weekly schedule. So I know that every couple of weeks, I kind of have to sit on a chair and talk to my camera for a while. And that really calms me down because I can show all my progresses, and it's not rather to show on the camera or my progress or how great I am as a knitter, but it's more for myself to keep track of everything that I'm doing and know that I have a kind of a schedule. On the painting side, I started doing this as well. Receiving a little bit of abuse from the internet world as well. And I kind of posed that side, and now I'm coming up with a video as I go. They're sort of more project videos. So if I'm painting something with a new interesting technique or something that I really am passionate about, I probably will film it and describe the technique or the subject through the video. So that is more an ad hoc type of situation rather than a formal bi-weekly thing like my knitting channel. Something that really surprised me when I started the knitting podcast is how more embracing the knitting community or the crafting community is rather than the art side of the house. And like, I mean, in a video I could receive 100, 200 comments from knitting people, and they are all lovely or constructive comments rather than eventually some sort of abuse on the art side. And I fear the competition there is the key of this big of an issue. So if I don't enjoy doing something, I probably wouldn't really put it up on internet. You know what I mean?
Well, when you think about your art, coming from Italy, moving to Ireland, how did your art change? Like, if you look at your paintings today from and like 10 years ago, like what's different?
I always am, and this is not just in my artworks, but generally as a person, really ruled based. So I'm kind of a traditional. So especially when I was younger, I used to follow the rules and paint by the style of someone or play by the style of someone. Like if I play a piece of Bach, for example, I would really look into the philology of how that piece would have been played in the 1700s to try and mimic that. And you probably know that through your son as well.
Right.
And the same goes for my artworks. I used to be really methodical and really looking into the techniques of the great painters. And that is due to being an Italian and being living in Italy. You know, you just go out of the door and there is a beautiful church painted by some wonderful Renaissance artist. So you are always surrounded by all of this system. And of course, the school is heavily portraying this system as well as a national pride. And of course, I am very proud of being Italian, very proud of this surrounding. But I feel like this constricts you a little bit into a mold. When I moved to Ireland, I desperately wanted to be part of the culture. I moved there because I fell in love with the Irish culture, and I kind of wanted to be Irish myself. And I kind of wanted to embrace the culture, at the same time say thank you to all the amazing Irish people that kind of adopted me. And so I was looking around, I was like, what should I make to say thank you to Ireland, but as well to bring myself a little bit forward and to be myself. And I got back to my roots and look into my house here in Italy, the farm I was living, and the things that are common in Ireland. So I started painting animals because were something that were really familiar for my upbringing, and as well are really common in Ireland. Farms and the farming world is 90% of the economy going on there. So it's really interesting to link the two of them. So I feel like now my style has lost a little bit these boundaries, and it's more getting stuck into bringing up what's already there and try to be an amplifier of the greatness of what's in Ireland or what's in Italy, rather than following the rules.
Talking of the Italian pride, right? Like one of the things that Italy most well known for is food. How do you feel as an Italian in Ireland? Like, do you try to show them how it's done?
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. I feel very strongly about this, as every Italian probably would. You know, food is probably the biggest culture that is untold. So it's not like Botticelli painted on a Vatican wall. Is something that is so intrinsic with being Italian that you can't even imagine. There is a good book out now from Stanley Tucci. He's of Italian descendants, and this book is called Taste. And he actually describes this very well. It's like, for Italian people, it's so natural that they don't even realize how pedantic and important it is for them to basically live their lives through food. And we are in the European Union, so it's so easy to find Italian food, very good products in Ireland as well. But I really try to be as traditional as possible with my food. I couldn't really eat anything else, to be honest. And, if something really quirky about Italian food is we have about 100 type of different shape of pasta. And each of those goes with a specific sauce. And this is something that foreigners can't understand. Right. So if I write a book in my life, I would probably write a dictionary of what pasta to use with what sauce. That is my goal in life.
Now for the promised surprise.
Hi Irina, let me share with you and your beautiful viewers my family recipe for a tiramisu. I don't know if I mentioned, but I was born in the very town in which a tiramisu was invented about 2 centuries ago. So I thought it was quite appropriate, and it's very simple and very delicious. For the base, you can buy store-bought Ladyfingers, or you can make your own. I always make my own because they are very simple and quite delicious as well. To make the biscuit, you will need 5 eggs. Separate the egg white and the yolks into bowls and add 30 grams of sugar to the egg whites. Whisk it up until you get a very stiff meringue. Do the same for the yolks and whisk it up until they become light and fluffy. Combine the two together, add 85 grams of flour and 35 grams of potato starch and combine. Pipe the biscuits on a tray and dust them with granulated sugar. Into the oven 200 degrees for 12 minutes each. For the cream, you will need 5 eggs. Separate the yolks from the white. Add 3 tablespoons of sugar to each bowl and whisk it up. Add 500 grams of mascarpone cheese and combine everything until very smooth. Put in the fridge for about an hour. Take your biscuits out of the oven and they should look beautifully gold. Make a very strong coffee, and I like to use my Italian mocha pot. This is quite a religious thing. When the coffee is ready, let it cool. Layer a layer of biscuits on your tray and soak it well with your coffee. Add the cream and smooth it out. Repeat this layer a couple of times if you wish. I like to have at least 2 layers and dust with cocoa powder. And there you have it. So you should let it rest for about 12 hours. I usually do my tiramisu for the weekend and I let it rest overnight, but I couldn't resist and I must try a slice. It's absolutely perfect. Enjoy!
Okay, so let's come back to fiber arts, right?
Yeah.
You're not just knitting like simple things. Like everything you make is somehow like blows my mind. Like it's very
Oh.
intricate, very sophisticated. How was that journey for you? Do you remember your early projects? Like, do you remember what you started with? Like when you were in school, what were you knitting? And how did you get to where you are today as far as knitting goes?
Yeah, so back in school, I remember knitting this very long green scarf that probably was knit on some acrylic yarn or something of sort. And well, I could only do knit and purl, and it was probably a card stitch full of holes, slip stitch, and fallen stitches, like something. But I was really proud of that. And I remember sitting with my great grandmother long hours, try to fix all the mistakes, and then bringing the project back to the teacher for the valuation. And that was basically it. And then I remember a long passion for granny squares, and my mom would knit probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 granny squares blankets a year and gift them for Christmas. And I was quite good in crocheting those as well. And yeah, then I was probably looking into sock knitting, but always plain stuff. The thing that probably clicked with the more intricate work is when I discovered stranded color work. And that is very silly, to be honest, how I discovered that. But I was in the middle of the pandemic, as usually looking into YouTube, and I stumbled across Arne and Carlos' podcast, Sit and Knit for a Bit, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely fell in love with the two of them, their artistic life, their actual life outside being creatives and artists. And I really got so fascinated with all those creations that I really wanted to learn. So I purchased a couple of books. I went to my local library, got some ideas on what to make, how to make, and I got to see some tutorials from Arne and Carlos and other Norwegian people. And yeah, I just kind of learned myself, and I can't stop. I find it really interesting to have the possibility of mixing colors and paint through yarn and creating something really beautiful. Although currently I'm trying to step a little back with my few latest project and kind of figure out if all is just color for me or texture as well. So I'm currently knitting, for example, the Anchor sweater by Petite Knit, and is a big color work yoke with texture. And I kind of want to see if I'm actually interested in this type of knitting as well. And yeah, does this answer your question a little bit?
Well, so I watched one of your latest episodes on your YouTube channel, and you were showing the socks that were that's your design and that were influenced by the architecture of Venice.
Yeah.
And that's like you have a series of projects that you do based on Venice. What's your ambition as far as being a designer? Like, where do you see yourself go with that?
Well, so first of all, how it came about is that I just mentioned that I was watching Arne and Carlos and other Norwegian podcaster, and how proud they are of their knitting tradition. There is a podcaster called Skandier Knits, and I suppose she is Norwegian and she lives in London. And she goes on talking about her Norwegian traditions on color work. And I couldn't but just draw a line with Norway and Italy. For example, here in the Dolomites, we have plenty of color work traditions that are now dead or dying. And nobody really know about them, but you can see them in the older generations or household decors and stuff like that. So with my kind of designing projects, I kind of want to bring this back to life. For example, I have here this hat here, which is a pattern I designed. And this pattern of hearts and flowers is basically on every single home decor on the traditional costume of Venice and all of this. So I feel like there is something missing here in the knitting tradition, in the modern knitting in Northern Italy. The collection that you're just mentioning about the buildings of the Canal Grande in Venice, so that is something that I kind of want to experiment a little bit with. There are these, I suppose there are about 200 palaces that are facing the main canal in Venice, and Venice is the capital of the region where I'm from. And these buildings are all unique and all particular, and they have these beautiful architectural designs or features that I kind of try inspiration and want to recreate in a colorwork design or eventually in a texture design going forward. And answer your question, it would be a dream of mine to be able to come up with a number of patterns and collect them in a more concrete and unique kind of booklet or book, and give people not just the pattern, but as well a little bit of the behind of the tradition or the history behind the pattern. For example, the simple flower and heart here, it's everywhere. Why is it everywhere? I'm sure there is some meaning behind that. Why do people from my region wear this pattern everywhere? So I would like to be able to have the chance to do some research on this and to bring some knowledge and share some knowledge with people as well. That's why probably I'm kind of start my designer journey as well.
Well, I mean, do you see yourself as a history enthusiast? Because like, I feel like every time you talk, you would give some bits and pieces of information, like trying to educate your viewers on the facts that like otherwise they might not be familiar with.
Yeah, I'm sure I am a history enthusiast, but I'm just very sad in knowing that all of this is dying and all of these traditions are dying. Like I was so very lucky to grow up with my great grandmother and my grandmother and my mom. So like there are 4 generations of ours living in the same house. And before that, there were other 4 generations of us. Like my mom would have met her great grandmother. And we share this knowledge that is now disappearing completely. And I'm really, really sad about that. An example could be, I don't know, I have a very young sister and she doesn't even speak with a Venetian accent when she speaks Italian, or she doesn't really understand Venetian language, which is really, really sad. So I kind of want to, being myself a Venetian and Italian living abroad, I kind of want to be a soundboard for all of this very small and particular culture that nobody seems really to care about, and try to educate people and to share this knowledge. And eventually, if someone decides to knit this pattern, will bring to their country, to its house, something that is really meaningful for my country and my house.
I had this conversation with Anne Godfrey, and she was she lived in Serbia for a number of years and worked a lot with like reviving Serbian fiber arts, like similar to what you are talking about. And one thing she said is that whenever somebody is trying to keep the secrets of like how to make something or how to create something, this is like most likely the secret that's going to die out first. And sharing it with other people and sharing it with other cultures is like what keeping that alive. Like, do you believe in that as well?
I do 100%. Unfortunately, though, I feel like we are running a battle here because, you know, if you have, I don't know, let's talk about a family recipe, which is another endeavor of mine. I was trying to collect some family recipes from the local area and kind of collect them in a book and kind of, I mean, try to figure out if there was any appetite for this book here. And the struggle was actually to get these recipes from other people. Seems like people don't want to share. It's a pride and it's a secret, or it's something that belongs to their family. So why would they share with the world? But I do agree then if you don't share, this is something that is going to die, and it's dying, especially here in a very small rural community. And yeah, I think the knitting community especially has shown me how important it is to share this knowledge. Yeah, and I was saying that, I mean, the knitting community is probably taught me how important it is to share. Like if you know something, you share with your community and everybody learn how to knit the specific stitch or that. And the knitting community is so open. And I think that is something the knitting community should teach everybody, to be so open about sharing, about keeping traditions.
So when you came to Ireland, you mentioned to me that there is even though there is like 5 sheep per each person, the yarn is not that easy to obtain. How is it like in comparison to Italy?
Well, I haven't purchased any yarn in Italy almost at all, but I think the spinning companies and the yarn companies are probably more popular in Italy and more outstream, and Italy is part of a bigger market. You know, we have to remember that Ireland is an island. Right. And it's being linked to the UK for a long time. So if like a year ago, even we could really buy yarn, very good yarn, almost all the yarn you could imagine from the UK. Now that the loom of Brexit has come to us, we really struggle to find yarn. And I'm in a quest now to find very good national Irish yarn produced in Ireland and dyed in Ireland as well. And I found that it's quite difficult. There are a lot of dyers out there, but they source their fibers abroad as well. So it's kind of a struggle to find something in Ireland. And knowing that Ireland has 5 sheep or 4 sheep per person, I find that quite interesting. And I was very recently talking to an alpaca farmer in the Wicklow Mountains, but big, massive farm. And they were mentioning that there aren't mills to process wool that can accommodate the amount of wool that is produced in Ireland. So everything goes abroad. And now that the UK is out of the scope, it's even more difficult to find something in mainland Europe for the Irish market. So I really wish eventually in the future things will be a little bit more smooth, or the UK will open, I don't know, the borders to some sort of yarn commerce again. That would be really helpful.
Well, do you consider yourself a yarn snob? Like you mentioned that your first project was acrylic. Like what do you knit with now?
So I am not a yarn snob at all. I mean, I tend to stick to wool now, just because I'm very conscious about the environment. And if I can not make an impact on the environment with my stuff, being art, being craft, that makes me really happy. So I tend to stick to natural fibers, though, I mean, for sock knitting, for example, I use nylon, but whatever. I feel like I am always conscious about the money I spend on yarn, and I can't bring myself to spend a lot of money on yarn. Even if I see this fancy dyed yarn, I would probably never buy more than a skein to knit a pair of socks, just because I'm so conscious about my own type of sustainability that I'm kind of limiting myself. And there are great companies that we are not mentioning here that sells yarn for kind of a reasonable amount of money. The second part is that being a kind of stepping into the design part of the world, the knitting world, I don't want my the people that decide to knit my stuff to be stuck with a super expensive 20, 30 euro skein of yarn. But I would like to give them options to be a little bit more mindful. And there are great yarns that don't cost a lot of money. So it's a win-win in my opinion.
What happens to everything you knit? Do you wear it all? Is it always for you, or do you like make it for others? Do you sell? Do you like what happens?
So yeah, this brings back to being a knitter in the closet still. I kind of never knit for other people, apart from like very small items like mittens or socks or a scarf, but I wouldn't probably never knit a jumper for someone else's. Did this because not it wouldn't be appreciated, or I believe in the jumper course if it's something, but because I feel like it would be too big of a coming out all at once to, okay, I knit you a jumper, and the person's head will explode in front of mine. So that is something I don't do. What I do is I knit for myself. If I don't wear something, I probably donate it to charity. That is something that I do on a regular basis. I knit this beautiful kind of like this Marius pattern, a beautiful cardigan, full-on color work, and I figured out that there weren't colors that I used. It was bright green and white, so I donated to charity with a big description on how to wash it, and yeah, that is something that I do.
What are you working on right now?
Well, right now I'm working on my anchor sweater. This is take 3 of this sweater. I've knitted it all using Studio Donegal yarn, which is a Irish produced, 100% Irish local yarn, produced, dyed, spun in Ireland from Irish sheep. And the yarn was extraordinarily coarse and very tough on my hands. So going through the knit, I lost gauge. I knit it all, tried on, and it was just a massive big bell. And I was like, well, this is not happening. So I unravel everything. If you saw my latest podcast, I have a giant ball of yarn. And I am started this again, knitting with an alpaca yarn, more soft, and probably will keep the gauge all the way through, hopefully. And actually, this is kind of an obsession because I've seen other people knitting this jumper, and I was like, why am I not able to get it right? I started it like 3 times already, and hopefully we are at a good stage now. I've seen Caleb from Drawing in Yarn and Jonathan Days from the Jonathan Days podcast knitting this jumper, and looks so well on them, and I really wanted it. The other thing I'm working on, and I don't have it with me now, it's another pair of socks for my Palaces of Venice collection, and this will come out probably in 2 weeks' time. I'm still waiting my tech editor to get back to me. Right. And that's basically it. Another thing I've done is the bubble sweater from Stephen West. Finished, took picture, put it up on Instagram. I thought to myself, well, I'm knitted it with superwash yarn, so put it in the washing machine. And just before I left for Italy, came out from the washing machine, massive and really, really bubbly. So I destroyed it. And so, yeah, you can't know what I've said in that moment, what came out of my mouth, but I am going to start that again very soon because it fits really well and I really liked it. So.
Right. Do you usually work on multiple projects at all the times, or are you like more of a one project at the time kind of guy?
This is a horrible question that I actually dreaded. So I am by nature a monogamous knitter. So I feel comfortable in knitting a project, finish it, and then start a new one. But for my battle against the algorithm, I have to work on multiple projects. So it's not something that is really playing easy in my mind. I don't feel comfortable in having 10, 20 projects on the go, but to be able to still build this community on YouTube and Instagram, I feel like it's sort of demanded for us to knit on multiple projects. So I'm knitting on multiple projects, although am I enjoy that? Probably not as much, but I'm creating a lot of stuff. So
what's your favorite thing about having YouTube channel?
Definitely the community. So I am not lucky to have a knitting community where I live. And so YouTube has given me the possibility of having a community and building the community and learning from all the people that I got in touch with in the few months that I have this channel. So definitely that one. And for sure, the learning possibilities. And yeah, these are the 2 main things. And it's why probably I'm spending so much time and resources in recording videos, editing them, and then publishing them. And I tend to really look forward just for the comments rather than all the metrics that YouTube gives you.
Right. I mean, you look at your very first podcast and the last episode that you just published. How is it different?
Well, I started my podcast only a few months ago, so it's not really such a time span that I can't feel any different. I think I am getting more familiar about talking about knitting techniques and using the appropriate terminology, something that I was really conscious about in my first video. I was sure I wasn't using the right wording or referring to the right, I don't know, when you talk about a yarn, for example, meters versus yards, ounces versus grams, that still is like mind-boggling for me, but I feel more comfortable in talking about this type of thing. And as my knowledge about yarn fibers and the techniques grows, as well, probably my confidence in telling people what I'm doing grows. So I think like we are kind of growing together, my channel, my followers, and myself.
Well, when you record yourself, right? Who do you talk to?
I 100% talk to a camera. I wouldn't, yeah, I know that as we speak, I have 1,200 followers, and I would never, by the life of me, get myself on a stage and talk with 100, 2,000 people. I used to play the piano, and probably the audiences were kind of big enough, but always protected me to have a barrier of something between myself and the audience, being the keys or being a camera. I'm really shy as a person, so I would probably never do that. But I do recognize that probably people have some values from a video that otherwise they wouldn't watch. And I am still working on being able to communicate to the person after the camera rather than the camera. And that is probably more of a personal type of development more than being a YouTuber development.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm glad that we've met. We've met through the Knitters Gonna Knit, actually, the group on Facebook, and I'm glad that you joined and posted there, and that's how I discovered you. I always find it interesting to see what other YouTubers doing and how, like, what tickles their fancy and what makes them come back again and like record again, you know, because for me, it's like, honestly, every time I read the comment, it makes my day. It's totally about like the feedback about it, you know, because sometimes I'm questioning, I'm waking up in the morning and I'm like, why am I putting myself out there? Why am I doing this? Why I'm harassing all these people with all these questions? And then I see the comment and it's like, okay, it made somebody discover a new artist and it made somebody inspired to try something new, and then it makes it all worth it for me.
You know, it's very important what you are doing, giving a platform to us all artists and crafters. And I think we desperately need some sort of platform to speak. And it's probably a goal of mine to be able to survive and pay my bills without, I can't say being a lawyer, but without having a daily job that doesn't involve crafts and art. And so if you didn't have this channel, probably I wouldn't have one of the chances that life would give me. So I'm really thankful about what you're doing, and all your viewers as well. So keep doing that. But yeah, I do share the thing. Why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself in front of a camera? I am personally not camera worthy and not photogenic at all. So putting myself on the camera is a struggle, but the comments and the people really makes it all.
Right. Well, I can't wait to see your collection being in a book, and I'm going to be the first one to buy that book. So please work on that. Please keep on working for it. And we're going to put all the information about you, your channels, your Instagram account, and everything in the description of this video, so people can, who don't know you yet, can discover you and hopefully follow, subscribe, like your videos and all that good stuff, and leave you a comment that's going to make your day. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity.